Welcome everyone. So just to give everyone a heads up, we are recording this session. So kindly so we can upload it to home channels later on. Yeah, so I hope it's okay that you leave the recording up to us to home. Um, and while we wait for a few minutes, to give other participants time to register. Um, Please read and check out the reminders in your screens. You can use the chat function to introduce yourselves to the entire group. And also, please be informed that we have interpretation available for English and French. So please use that function as much as you want. And also um, be mindful when we speak in consideration of our interpreters. Please speak a little slower than usual. Um, Also, when you're not speaking, it would be great if you could all mute yourselves um, so that we do not disturb the room. And then if it's difficult in terms of connection, we also encourage you to turn off your cameras, but also later on during our open discussion after the presentations, you may of course turn on your videos if you want, when you have questions or comments and you wish to speak. And lastly, make yourselves comfortable. Yeah. So maybe let's give it 2 more minutes and then we can start formally with the webinar. So welcome again, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar by the Home Alliance and the Africa Working Group against geoengineering. I am Nikki Martinez, and I support the Hands Off Mother Earth Alliance from the Philippines. I will now give the floor to Joshua Aruna, who would formally open this webinar. Joshua?
Ok, bienvenue à tout le monde pour cette réunion de webinaire. La réunion webinaire qui est organisée aujourd'hui par le groupe de travail Home of Africa, qu'on appelle le groupe de travail sur la géoingénierie. Cette réunion est organisée à l'occasion de la célébration de la Journée internationale de la Terre, notre mère nourricière. Vous êtes tous la bienvenue pour prendre part à cette position de la société civile africaine. Bien entendu, vous devez connaître d'abord OMF, c'est quoi? Home, c'est un groupe de travail de la société civile africaine au sein de cette alliance. L'alliance elle-même a été créée en 2010 lors de la conférence sur le climat qui a eu lieu à Cochabamba et qui a porté sur les droits de la terre nourricière. Et le Rome qui est un manifeste qui a été publié en 2010 a été signé par au moins plus ou moins 200 organisations du monde entier qui avaient décidé de se joindre ensemble pour signer cette position afin de défendre notre terre qui est notre mère nourricière. Voilà pourquoi l'Alliance OMF, à travers le groupe de travail africain qui réunit les acteurs de la société civile africaine, cherche à mobiliser la résistance contre la géoingénierie à travers un grand mouvement africain. Voilà pourquoi aujourd'hui, dans cette manifestation où nous célébrons ensemble la Journée internationale de la Terre, on aura des présentations pour comprendre les menaces qui pèsent sur la Terre, notre mère nourricière à travers la géoingénierie. Il y aura une petite introduction pour raisons pour lesquelles il s'agit d'une distraction dangereuse. Quand on parle de la géoingénierie, ça sera présenté par le docteur Fonisso Antia. Fonisso Antia, elle est docteur en sciences de l'environnement et elle milite pour la justice climatique. Elle est titulaire d'un doctorat en toxicologie environnementale. Elle travaille au sein de la fondation HOMEF en tant que responsable du programme et chef de projet, supervisant également beaucoup d'espaces d'apprentissage de HOMEF. Elle est également coordinatrice anglophone de la plateforme africaine dans le cadre d'évaluation des technologies, communément appelé AFRITAP, qui est un réseau qui fait partie des membres de l'Alliance OMF, dont elle fait partie. Elle coordonne actuellement les groupes de travail sur la géoingénierie en Afrique. Voilà pourquoi elle va nous présenter l'introduction à la géoingénierie et les raisons pour lesquelles il s'agit d'une distraction très dangereuse pour l'Afrique. Le deuxième présentateur, nous avons vraiment des présentateurs très pointus qui vont parler de la distraction dangereuse qui s'ajoutent les unes les autres. Le risque pour les populations, les risques pour les écosystèmes liés à la géoingénierie et les risques d'élimination des dioxydes de carbone par voie terrestre ou des méthodes de compensation qui sont aujourd'hui propulsées en Afrique. Ça sera présenté par M. Kwame. M. Kwame, c'est un acteur de la société civile qui a au moins plus de 50 ans d'expérience dans la justice environnementale et climatique. Il est le point focal et coordinateur de la campagne sur les industries extractives, le tourisme et les infrastructures. Il a le niveau de master en développement culturel, axé sur la culture, la paix et le développement. Le troisième présentateur pour cette réunion d'aujourd'hui, à cette célébration, va nous présenter sur l'Afrique et la jeunesse comme champ de bataille. L'Afrique est considérée comme champ de bataille pour faire progresser la géoingénierie solaire. Et ça sera présenté par un jeune talentueux qu'on appelle Erika. Eric, c'est un jeune Kenyan qui est un activiste climatique originaire de Kenya. Il a commencé son activisme climatique depuis 2017 en s'organisant avec les groupes 0R et puis Free Day for Future Kenya. Et puis après, quand il a constaté qu'il y avait une sécheresse très prolongée au Kenya qui avait impacté négativement même son école. La dernière intervenante, c'est une dame. C'est une dame. Il y a également l'autre, l'avant-dernière, va parler sur célébrer et construire les victoires de INEA 6. INEA 6, c'est la réunion qui a eu à Nairobi au Kenya il n'y a pas longtemps, où le groupe de travail a participé. C'est présenté par Marie Church. Marie Church qui travaille pour le Centre de droit international de l'environnement, qu'on appelle les CIEL. Marie est responsable de la campagne sur la géoingénierie dans le cadre du programme sur l'économie fossile. Elle est basée au Royaume-Uni. Son travail se concentre sur les menaces croissantes que représente la modification du rayonnement solaire, la géoingénierie marine et les technologies hautement spéculatives d'élimination de carbone à grande échelle. Et le dernier intervenant pour cette réunion, c'est M. Aubrey Joy, qui va nous présenter sur la question de la ne pas géoingénieriser l'Afrique. Et c'est ça notre campagne, la lutte continue. Comment participer aux mobilisations nationales, régionales et aux activités de plaidoyer. Aubrey, c'est un jeune activiste qui est basé au Nigeria. Il est responsable administratif pour l'action sur les droits de l'environnement et ami de la terre basé au Nigeria. Il est coordinateur de la justice climatique et de l'énergie pour les amis de la terre. Il a au moins 16 ans d'expérience dans la campagne de la justice climatique et il a commencé sa première campagne de justice en tant que leader de mouvement des étudiants au sein de leur campus. Voilà un peu de manière brève la présentation sommaire de nos éminents intervenants que nous souhaitons leur bienvenue et nous vous souhaitons tous le bienvenu. Moi-même qui vous parle en tant que modérateur, je suis Josué Aruna. Je travaille comme point focal de cette campagne en RDC, en République démocratique du Congo, et je suis le directeur exécutif de l'ONG Congo Basin Conservation Society. Je vais laisser la parole à Dr Foniso Antia. Bienvenue, docteur, pour présenter votre présentation. Merci.
Hi, everyone. It's afternoon in Nigeria. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Permit me to take off my video to maximize the bandwidth. Thank you. Okay, like Joshua rightly said, Joshua, thank you for that session of introduction and then the general introduction of the program. My name is Mfoniso. And I want to share briefly in the next few minutes about geoengineering and how it is a dangerous distraction for Africa. Can I have the next slides, please? Next slide, please. So I'll briefly just give us what to say, a textbook, although there's no textbook or CSO definition of what geoengineering is. And then I'll move on to talking about hold on, I'm asked to confirm my speaking language. I don't know what that is. Is this a finicky? Am I supposed to confirm first? Something just pop up and I'm not seeing English there. Okay. I think I'm coming. All right. I just did. Okay, so I'm going to briefly talk about, give us a CSO definition of geoengineering, which already you're seeing there, and then talk about the types of geoengineering, and then I'll talk about why we are concerned about this risky technology. So from a definition of geoengineering, we say that geoengineering is large-scale technological interventions in the Earth's oceans, soils, and atmosphere with the aim of treating some of the symptoms of climate change, which we all do experience, rather than addressing its root cause. So we have proponents of geoengineering go about looking for a quick way out of in disguise, climate change, instead of talking about the very cause, the very reason why we are even in this mix in the first place. So geoengineering is that one of those solutions that they are proposing, howbeit it's a false solution. Geoengineering is neo-colonial and imperial. It represents a continued effort by rich countries and corporations and their allies to, one, evade their own responsibility for causing climate change, like I have mentioned. They don't want to take responsibility for the things that they did that brought us to this place, and the obligations to reduce the excessive consumption and dangerous climate pollution. Nobody wants to take their hands off the pedal of fossil fuels and the linear way of production and consumption. They just want to continue in the status quo, continue to exploit Africa for fossil fuels and other resources to fuel their continued overconsumption and pollution, as I've said. Geoengineering is a means that would allow them to continue in the way it is, continue to dig different parts of Africa for more fossil fuels just to fuel their pockets. And number three, to shift the burden of climate change to further to Africa as the most vulnerable continent. We all know that Africa has done the least to contribute to this, but the burden of climate change is being shifted to Africa in this time in their proposal for geoengineering. Next slide, please. Geoengineering represents a continued effort by rich countries and corporations to, number four, to distract Africans from its focus on climate finance, adaptation and real solutions, and to skew climate finance away from African priorities towards the priorities of rich countries and corporations. Currently, Africa is demanding climate debt, demanding that the rich countries pay the debt they owe us for causing the issues we have already in climate change. But with bringing this a techno-fixed solution like geoengineering now, it's an attempt to take our attention away from the demands that we are making. Number five, to turn Africa into a testing ground for most dangerous technologies to continue and influence current patterns of production, consumption, and pollution, and for profit. Presently, the technologies are not proven to be working. So what they practically want to do is to turn Africa to a testing, a petri dish or a laboratory where you can just test. Everyone just come in, use Africa to do whatever they want. And then the next one is to persuade Africa that these approaches are in their best interest and should become their own agenda, which they should champion. Thankfully, in the last UNIA 6, Africa is beginning to wake up to this reality, and which one of my colleagues is going to explain more in the next few presentations. And finally, to launch another attempt at controlling and recolonizing Africa with a powerful technology such as geoengineering. We have a problem of governance with this technology. Imagine that a certain rich country is able to have ability to make rain fall and make sunshine shine and make droughts and all those things happen by themselves. Imagine what that would mean for Africa. Next slide, please. So we have different types of geoengineering. Basically, geoengineering can be categorized into either where it is being deployed, whether land, water, or in the air. But basically, we have two categories. We have the carbon dioxide removal, which aims to remove greenhouse gases, which is mostly carbon for now, from the atmosphere after they've already been generated. So presently, we have issues with the quantity of carbon we have in the atmosphere, which is what is causing the issues with climate change. So the proponents of geoengineering is saying that we have a means to take out this carbon from the atmosphere. It sounds very good, right? But there are underlying factors that raises red flag for this proposal. Examples of carbon dioxide removals, which is in short called CDR, carbon capture and storage. We have carbon capture, utilization and storage, direct air capture and storage, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, artificial trees, ocean fertilization, artificial upwelling and downwelling, ocean alkalinization, and enhanced weathering. We have seaweed and alga plantation. All of these are measures in which they propose will trap carbon from, some would directly trap carbon and some other things. And have downward part of the oceans. All of these are things that are just speculative. Number two, and type of geoengineering solar radiation modifications. Earlier it was called the nomenclature just keep changing to distract people. This SRM aims to reflect or block solar radiation to reduce the warming effect. So right now in some parts of the world, there's a lot of heating effect. And so the proposal is that they're going to do so many things. For example, putting orbital space mirrors to reflect sunlight away from the earth so that the warming effect will reduce. Put space bubbles, stratospheric aerosol injection, genetically modified albedo enhanced trees and plants, and just plant things that are going to that's already genetically modified to be able to reflect the sunlight that is coming into the atmosphere. Marine cloud brightening, throwing some particles into clouds around marine ecosystem to reflect sunlight. All of this is in with the aim that you can be able to reflect sunlight and send back the heat that we have into the atmosphere. We have some proponents of geoengineering, which are proposing interventions in the atmosphere. Most prominently emerging is the SAI that I mentioned, which releases sulfide particles over a time frame of possibly 200 years or even centuries into the atmosphere, into the stratosphere to limit incoming sun radiation. Other schemes include dumping of megatons of reflective materials like glass microspheres over ice surfaces to prevent melting. So we think that we have the power to be able to prevent the melting of the ice cubes and ice surfaces so that we will not have the intending flood that is beginning to be caused by climate change. There are even proposals to create very precise nanoparticles, nano-sized particles of seaweed to spray into the clouds, a technique called the marine cloud brightening, which I mentioned earlier. There are also proposals for interventions in the oceans. For example, dumping of iron pellets, which is the ocean fertilization to stimulate plankton growth without thinking of what will happen when planktons overgrow and causing all the issues. We have enhanced weathering, which I mentioned. There are also schemes to manipulate our ecosystems with great risk, which comes with great risks and uncertainties, as well as with foreseeable adverse impacts on our complex natural ecosystem and communities, depending on them. We know already that a lot of the African countries depend on our ecosystems for survival, for their livelihood. But with these proposals to manipulate this, no one is thinking about what the risk would be. Okay, not no one, at least the proponents are not thinking, or they don't care about what the risk would be for the people who depend on these ecosystems for their survival. Next slide, please. Can you hear me next slide? Okay, so the topic was why we are concerned, the implications of this. Why are we concerned about geoengineering? Someone would say, but the aim is for us to be able to manage the implications of climate change right now. Why are we concerned about it? So these are a few reasons why we're concerned about the technology as Africans, and which is also almost the same reason why the other parts of the world are concerned about it. The first one is that geoengineering technologies risk disrupting local and regional weather patterns and further imbalance the climate with potential catastrophic effects for Africa, including water availability and food production. Right now, there are parts of Africa who are already facing water issues, unavailability issues, and food production. Imagine bringing the technology that is going to risk this and further make this continue. The next one is that the adverse impacts and side effects could cause more regional and international conflicts, threatening global peace and security. When there will be issues of who governs what and who is taking the lead on what, that is going to be, that's a potential red flag for conflict. And then, of course, global peace and security. Another one is that some of the technologies that aim to manipulate climate and weather originated in the military and have a significant potential to be weaponized. I think we would all agree here with me that a person who is able to make rainfall in some places, make sunshine, and be able to manipulate the weather is able to could stand the possibility of weaponizing these technologies. A country could decide today that a powerful country could decide today that they don't want this part of Africa to exist, or they want to wipe out everyone in this part of the world just because maybe they want to recolonize the place and all that. And that's a very alarming risk there. Deploying sun-blocking technologies in particular may depend on military infrastructure and could create a new geopolitical imbalance of short-term winners and losers in the race to control the Earth's thermostat, which I just mentioned already. It's an excuse for developed countries to continue polluting and expand their dangerous fossil fuels exploration across Africa and around the world. This is, to me, the main concern about geoengineering. So people don't want to take responsibility for what they've caused. All they want is a short way out of what they do, just so that they can continue their pollution, continue their exploitation, and then continue to deploy Africa. Geoengineering will enable the testing of dangerous technologies on African people and countries and the skewing of finance away from adaptation, climate debt payment, and real climate solutions, like I have mentioned. One of the immediate solutions that we should think about is how to leave the fossils in the ground. But again, the powerful countries and their allies don't want to think about this solution, because this will mean that the money that's the profits that wells their pocket will have to reduce. So they don't want to think about that. Instead, they'd rather do something and push the problem to the future generations, unborn generations, to think about solving and how to deal with it. Another concern is that these technologies present unacceptable levels of risk. In the case of solar geoengineering, implementation of the technology may even lock the world into a nightmare situation where the technologies need to be maintained for thousands of years. And failure to do this will lead to termination shock, a situation where if this technology is stopped, let's say, for instance, some people are proposing that, can we just try this? And then if it doesn't work in the future, we can now stop it. But that's not the case with solar radiation management. If you stop it on the way, if you continue for some years and then stop it on the way, it will push the world to what we call termination shock, where the heating situation in the world will be much higher than what you're already experiencing. Some of these technologies, like the solar geoengineering, are ungovernable. I've already mentioned it. Of course, there's going to be issues with countries, big countries fighting on who is going to take leadership on the technologies. Please, next slide. Nikki, are you there? Can you hear me? Okay, so I mentioned that I'm going to just briefly mention a few of geoengineering projects in Africa. There are a lot of them right now, but mostly in Africa, we have a lot of research proposals and ongoing. Some have been finished already. I'll just mention so that it won't look like we are saying that these things are things that are happening somewhere else. They're already in Africa and there are proposals everywhere. ETC group, the etc. group, have an interactive geoengineering map which they co-created with Enrichable Foundation. In that map, you have about 1,800 in my last check, known geoengineering projects and experiments. Of these ones, you have planned, ongoing, completed, or canceled projects. About 5% are located on the continent, in African continent. An evaluation of known African geoengineering projects conducted earlier 2021 found that the majority of the projects to date, like I said, are research projects initiated and funded by public and private donors from North America, Europe, and Australia. While some African countries like Gabon, DRC, Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, and Gambia are going around the circles, they are not too certain as to whether or not to embrace geoengineering technologies and include them outrightly in their NDCs. Sadly, some of our countries have specifically mentioned their plan to embrace these technologies. I think there are even more now, naming CCS, that's carbon capture and storage, as a possible measure in their first NDC. You have countries like Egypt, South Africa, Malawi, and Lesotho. Two other countries, Cape Verde and Mauritius, have mentioned carbon capture in their marine context in their NDCs. The other countries who are still dilly-dallying on whether or not to do that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so in
Oh, Vanessa, are you there? Okay, we just lost Mafuniso, but
On a perdu l'oratrice. Il semble
Apologies about that. I'm back now.
Okay, welcome.
Okay, can I continue now? Okay, so the initiative invited individuals and teams to develop this project that will lock away carbon permanently away. Competition map showed that there were 1,132 teams that applied for the prize money. And of these, 14 applications came from African countries, including applications from Cameroon, Egypt, Kenya, Mauritius, Namibia, Nigeria, Tunisia, Senegal, and South Africa. 6 teams dealt with capture of CO2 from ambient air. 3 teams each with rock-based or ocean-based solutions, and the teams with voucher and another with bioenergy capture, carbon capture and storage. Let me need to say that one of the other things that is alarming is that people don't think about, especially those who plan to capture carbon and store on rocks, don't think about carrying capacity of this element that they want to store this carbon in. If presently we are having the carbon in the atmosphere, it is causing that is over the years build up and it's causing this much damage. Imagine storing carbon in a rock or in any other medium, and it exceeds its carrying capacity, and it has to break and open for it to come out in one time. Can you imagine what havoc that would cause? Next slide. Nikki, next slide, please. Okay, so this was just me putting up a few other mentions of where ongoing research and stuff where one of the major donors and trust funds is World Bank CCS Trust Fund, and they funded projects, GE projects in Botswana, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, which these major research projects have been completed. We have some other ones that are ongoing, other major research projects. And this one is funded by decimal funds in South Africa, Benin Republic, and Ivory Coast. We have another one in South Africa, Center for Carbon Capture and Storage, which is functioning and running already. We have World Bank CCS Trust Fund funding a research project in Nigeria. And we have a CCS project which has been completed already in Algeria. It was in collaboration with Sala CO2. Ongoing non-research projects in Africa. We have African Voucher Partnership, ABP in Cape Verde, Orapa and Geoengineering Diamond Mines for CCS2 in Botswana. And then we also have the Venetia Diamond Mine for CCS in South Africa, Algae Project in Morocco, in partnership with Omega Green Morocco and Brilliant Planet. Please, next slide. So if you want to know more about one of these projects, because in the interactive map that we have with interactive map by ETC, you have the ones listed countries by countries. You have the ones listed in regions and in continents, the projects that are ongoing, the ones that are completed. I also have a document I could share with us about that. And there are also planned CCS projects that we should look out for. There's one in collaboration with Brennan CCS project in Algeria, gas CCUS plant with Eni and Winter Shield in Egypt, MOPCO Blue Ammonia CCS, which is also planned in Egypt. There are lots of these projects planned in Egypt, in Nigeria here. It is a pilot trial. And then in South Africa, there are records of several initiated and council projects scattered around the continent, so which you can check the interactive map. I'm going to try to drop a link immediately after now for us to for anyone who wants to check the interactive map. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, for us to, as a working group, which Joshua did mention earlier, we are from different organizations, but we picked interest with the fight against geoengineering. And so we came together as we were brought together by the General Hands-Off Mother Aid Alliance Group to create what we call the African Working Group, which we started with a project we titled Don't Geoengineer Africa. And then one of the things we've done so far is to create this policy brief. It's a very easy to read policy brief on geoengineering. hold on this policy brief, we have, if you want to know more about what geoengineering is, like I have mentioned, but you have more details here. Why is geoengineering dangerous? How is geoengineering being, normalized in Africa, and then the myths? We have on the content what is happening in Africa and other parts of the world about on geoengineering. You have links to other dangerous distractions that are almost like geoengineering. Africa and on the battleground, where you talk about how Africa is being persuaded to take the lead on geoengineering, or being deceived to take the lead, that it will be for their own interest. And of course, we have a record of what happened, which Mary is going to talk about at Junior 6. And then, of course, moving forward, the call for non-use agreements, which is one of the things that we hope that a lot of us are going to be able to sign on to when we finish and conclusion. So I will share a link and maybe a copy of a PDF copy to this policy brief for us, which we launched last year during the Junior 6 in Kenya. I'm hoping that we are able to, this year, that we are able to interact with this document. We have a French version, which I'm sure that in a few weeks' time, we'll be able to have for the Francophone African speakers, we'll be able to have hard copies handed to you from one of our allies in Togo already. But the English version for some of us that were in Kenya was shared, and we're going to keep sharing it. And of course, you can interact with this online or interact with this as a PDF copy that I'm going to share. So this is where I will end my presentation today. Thank you very much for listening.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Nisso. Nous allons demander à nos participants, à nos alliés, de bien noter leurs questions, parce qu'à la fin de la session, on va vous laisser le temps de questions-réponses. Merci beaucoup, parce que nous venons de comprendre les dangers dont nous faisons face à cette technologie à risque qui détourne l'attention de la communauté internationale pour soutenir les initiatives climatiques au niveau de nos pays et au niveau local. Voilà pourquoi nous allons passer à la deuxième présentation avec M. Kwame. M. Kwame qui va nous parler sur les risques pour les populations. Si nous adoptons la géoingénierie, les risques pour la population, pour les écosystèmes, ils sont liés à la géoingénierie et à l'élimination des dioxydes de carbone par voie terrestre. Bienvenue, M. Kwame. Vous avez la table. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you, Faniso, for the introductory presentation. So as we said, I'm going to focus more on the risk to people and ecosystem from land-based carbon dioxide, removal geoengineering, and offsets in Africa.
Merci.
Okay, so I just want to recall that the impact of climate change is getting worse on the African continent. We are experiencing continuously droughts, flooding, coastal erosion, and many effects of climate change. First solutions to climate crisis are pushed into Africa, including geoengineering. I think Mfaniso have covered the definition of geoengineering technologies, which are simply dangerous distractions. So we need to bear in mind that adopting and implementing real solutions are the way to go to solve climate crisis. So this image, bicycle, is the machine that fights climate change, and we can promote it to fight climate change. It's efficient and efficacious. So as I said, I will talk more on offset and land-based carbon dioxide removal, geoengineering, and also focus more on environmental and social risk for people in Africa while talking of geoengineering. Next slide, please. Okay. No, please. Leave it there, leave it there. So, so in terms of geoengineering, why are we saying that it's or they are dangerous distractions? Unfaniso said it, but I would like to complement saying that there is technological uncertainty. So it is important to note that carbon dioxide removal and solar radiation modification are still in their infancy. So their effectiveness and long-term consequences remain uncertain. So it is then clear that relying on unproven technologies will divert attention from more immediate and proven solutions. So they are distracting us, putting geoengineering on the table to discuss. So second aspect, it's environmental and social risks. Geoengineering interventions can easily lead to the environmental impacts. For instance, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage that I would like to elaborate more after these slides, which is a CDR approach. CDR is a carbon dioxide removal. So the BECS may require clearing large forested areas or displacing food crops. So by doing so, biodiversity will be threatened, food sovereignty and food security will be threatened as well, and land rights. People will lose their rights. We'll see it more. So pushing for geoengineering in diverting is diverting people attention and focus on immediate action against climate crisis. So they are very, very dangerous distraction, and we don't want them in Africa. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So what is land-based carbon dioxide removal geoengineering, and what is offsets? So we need to understand that land-based carbon dioxide removal methods aim to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, but using terrestrial ecosystems. And that's very clear. So they are using natural resources. So the ecosystem on the earth, they want to use them to remove carbon. And some of the examples that I put here are afforestation and reforestation. It means planting trees and restoring forests to enhance carbon sequestration. So it's very clear that planting trees, it means taking a huge amount of land from communities to plant those trees, and restoring forests. They may put some species that are not in condition in that forest, just to destroy the biodiversity. For them, it's just to have trees to capture, to sequestrate carbon. Second example, soil carbon sequestration. It means to improve soil health and organic carbon content. So the bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, which is BECS, it's to use a huge amount of biomass to burn a huge amount of trees for energy, and the carbon that the burning is emitting, they will store it as storage. So it's dangerous for communities in Africa because using biomass is not one tree, it's not 2 or 3, 4 trees. It's a massive of land where they're going to plant. And you know, if they got land in Africa, we all know the consequences. We'll come back on that later. And land-based carbon dioxide removal method also, one of the examples is enhanced weathering. I think Umfaniso talked about it. The direct air capture also, Umfaniso talked about it. So the carbon offsets. For the carbon offsets, we need to understand that it's a compensation schemes. So very simply, someone will just emit CO2 somewhere and ask people to keep a forest somewhere else in Africa, for instance, to store the carbon or to reduce the carbon. This is kind of nonsense. It's not a solution to climate change. It's just a distraction to continue polluting and to continue grabbing our lands and expanding the fossil fuel industries into Africa. So having that said, next slide, please. So having that said, the consequences of offsets and land-based carbon dioxide removal, geoengineering, there are many in Africa. So forest and biodiversity loss. So I said it. If you implement BECS, you need to clear off biodiversity. You need to clear off forests to plant trees, monoculture trees, and monoculture tree plantation use the amount of pesticides. And it destroys the biodiversity. It also impacts soil fertility, and it impacts food sovereignty. It impacts a lot of communities in terms of food cultivation. People are displaced because of the projects. So land is being taken from people, so people are forcibly displaced. And also communities, the whole community, you can see the whole communities moved away from the place because there is PEX projects. And for carbon offsetting, we have RED Plus project, for instance, that can take hostage the whole forest that community is using. So it creates conflicts, it creates inter-community conflicts and intra-community conflicts. If people move from one community to another, there are conflicts around the land, there are conflicts around resources, natural resources, and also human rights are violated. And using a lot of pesticides, destroying biodiversity. So the right to a safe environment is violated. The right to health is violated, and access to water, access to decent housing are all violated. So geoengineering is dangerous for Africa people, and we don't want. Instead of promoting geoengineering, better to promote real solutions, which are agroecology, community forest management, and also put in the hand of communities the real solutions. So we also have to stop the persistence of the colonial legacy, patriarchy, and the debt traps. Communities in Africa see geoengineering as system of oppression and exploitation. So while land belongs to communities, the first resources for communities is land. So the land is being taken from communities. So they are oppressed, they are beaten, they are killed because they fight back. Implementing geoengineering will be a source of oppression and exploitation. So African countries' governments, I'm sure they will go for more loans to get involved in BECS because they will see in BECS a solution for climate change, and they will kill African people in getting into that because the debt trap is easily there. Many African countries are into already carbon credit, for instance, and they will go for BECS as well. And more sacrifice zones are emerging because of geoengineering. Once geoengineering is implemented, it means more fossil industries will be expanded in Africa. And what's happening already in Ogoni, in Nigeria, in Chad, in Ghana, no more place to run to. So people are desperate. So sacrifice zones are there. Water is there, but we can't utilize them. Our forests are there, we can't utilize them because it's been grabbed. So those are the risks and the consequences that we can face implementing geoengineering. Next slide. I would like to thank you for your attention. And we need a real solution instead of dangerous distractions. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, M. Kwame. Merci à tout le monde. Et nous venons de suivre les conséquences de la géoingénierie en Afrique et la société civile. Nous devons continuer à nous positionner pour montrer notre position. Voilà pourquoi on va passer à la troisième présentation. La troisième présentation qui montre que l'Afrique et la jeunesse. L'Afrique et la jeunesse constituent les champs de bataille pour faire progresser la géoingénierie. Ça sera présenté par M. Erika Njuguna. C'est un jeune activiste du climat. Erika, vous avez le micro. Merci beaucoup. Bienvenue. Erika?
Hello, hi everyone. Yes, thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Erica. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a youth climate justice organizer based in Nairobi, Kenya, and was at UNEA where I saw young people pushing for solar radiation modification. Proponents of geoengineering organizations like Silver Lining have weaponized young people's lack of knowledge on solar geoengineering to manufacture consent for these false solutions, presenting one-sided narratives on these technologies, and hence in turn, young people using their own institutions for policy engagement, like the Youth Constituency, to legitimize these false solutions in negotiations. Over the years, we've seen young people either calling for more research, which is very ambiguous in the sense that more research, there is already enough research saying that geoengineering in itself is dangerous. And we need to embrace the Rio Principle 19, which calls for precautionary measures. And there's also, it's ambiguous. Calling for more research, as young people were calling for, is ambiguous in the sense that we have enough research, but also what does research actually mean? outdoor experiments also counts as research. And as we fight for geoengineering, we need fight against geoengineering. We need to be pushing back against outdoor experiments because of their transnational impacts. It could have impacts on other areas, and of course other negative impacts, as Foniso has talked about. And one thing is that aside from young people pushing for geoengineering, youth is a demographic, not a political grouping. And so a lot of young people pushing for geoengineering just go under this banner of youth. And the reality is that lots of young people, including myself, have signed on to the Solar Geoengineering and Use Agreement, which is which complements the CBD moratorium on geoengineering, which actually calls for a moratorium, right? And young people across the globe, including Fridays for Future, have come together to push back against solar geoengineering, debunk these narratives that young people are using, and also saying that it's a false solution, that we need the socio-economic transformation instead of a solution that just fixes the symptoms of the climate crisis. And another impact of solar geoengineering that young people need to be wary about is Mfoniso has talked about termination shock. And say proponents of geoengineering decide to put sulfur into the stratosphere, right? To stop it, to stop it immediately would lead to termination shock. But once you've already launched it and you don't want to cause termination shock, and you realize it's bad, which it is already, then you'd have to pump in sulfur into the atmosphere for centuries as you reduce it, which is also very dangerous, and has the future. Then the responsibility falls on future generations to keep pumping it onto the atmosphere so that you don't cause termination shock. And that responsibility shouldn't be passed on to young people right now and the future generations. And that is why we need to get behind this call against geoengineering as a false solution. Thank you.
OK. Merci beaucoup, Eric, pour la brillante présentation et l'engagement de la jeunesse. Le groupe de travail de la société civile africaine sur la géoingénierie a besoin de la jeunesse et tous les autres jeunes qui sont en ligne ici. Vous êtes appelés à vous associer à ces groupes. On va passer à la célébration de l'INEA 6 pour voir la victoire récente par rapport à la position de la société civile africaine. OK, on va célébrer et construire sur les victoires récentes. Et ça sera présenté par Marie Tchetch. Marie Tchetch, il vient de l'organisation Les Ciels. Marie Tchetch, vous avez le micro, bienvenue. Marie?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Yeah, I've just popped my camera on briefly to say hello to you all, but I will switch it off again if that's going to help with people's bandwidth. Yeah. Okay. So hi. Yeah, you've heard from previous speakers what geoengineering is, why it's such a dangerous distraction, and why Africa is being targeted with these theories and technologies of neocolonialism. And what I want to talk to you about today is this really quite important win that we saw recently at the United Nations Environment Assembly, very much as a result of African leadership, and also to touch briefly on the highly symbolic defeat of Harvard University's flagship solar radiation modification project as well. So the 6th United Nations Environment Assembly took place in Nairobi in February. And Switzerland put forward a resolution there asking the United Nations Environment Programme to carry out an assessment of the science and establish an expert working group on solar radiation modification. And this follows a prior attempt a few years ago where the Swiss put forward a wider resolution on all forms of geoengineering, including what is now increasingly referred to as carbon dioxide removal, and other panelists have touched on some of these forms of geoengineering. But solar radiation modification, so the sort of the narrow focus on solar radiation modification with this resolution this time, what that means, as you heard from Mfaniso earlier, we're talking about an array of techniques designed to partially block or reflect the sun's rays with the intention of cooling the climate. And it does absolutely nothing to tackle the root causes of climate change, but instead brings with it a whole host of new environmental, social, and geopolitical risks. So it would likely alter the climate in unpredictable ways, right? With regional and seasonal variations. So you're thinking about messing with the monsoon, messing with Amazon rainfall, for example, interfering with photosynthesis and therefore crop yields, all kinds of really quite harmful and unpredictable in their precise sort of application risks. And some forms of SRM also carry the risk of termination shock, with which other panelists have also talked about. Importantly, it's untestable. So all forms of geoengineering at the level that they would be needed to actually have any kind of significant impact on the climate, that scale is effectively deployment. So they're untestable other than through deployment, and they are ungovernable. So there's nothing in the history of humanity to give comfort to the idea that they could be governed safely or fairly, because we're talking about global governance as well as intergenerational governance of some really quite dangerous, high-risk technologies. And according to a report from the Human Rights Council's Advisory Committee, climate-altering technologies like SRM put millions, if not billions, of people's human rights at risk. So that was the sort of the area that the Swiss wanted to cover in their resolution to UNEA this year. And while their intention may have been well-meaning in putting this resolution forward, what the proposal did was it risked legitimizing these dangerous technologies and undermining the de facto moratorium that's in place since 2010 under the Convention on Biological Diversity. And then there's the fact that UNEP's track record on this issue is not so good. So last year it published a report which was conducted by a small group which included geoengineering proponents but had no critical voices. The report wasn't peer-reviewed and it made some highly controversial recommendations that risked encouraging outdoor experiments. And crucially, there's this question of who would have been on this expert group. So when the field of experts in this area is dominated by those who, for one reason or another, support research and development in the area and are effectively this group of proponents of these technologies, then there was a real danger that it's these voices that we would see crowding into any expert group like this that was set up. And then there's the fact that a bad resolution can always get worse once it's on the negotiating table. And in fact, that's exactly what we saw at UNEA. So we saw concerted efforts by rich, powerful countries led by the USA, Saudi Arabia, but also China, Canada, Japan, India, to weaken the resolution and limit any kind of process, any kind of discussion that would have happened on SRM to the physical sciences, and shutting down this wider discussion of social, environmental, and geopolitical risks. And actually, the US went so far as to attempt to establish a link between any work that would have happened under UNEP with this World Climate Research Programme, so this new lighthouse activity on climate intervention research that had been launched only a week or two, funnily enough, before the Environment Assembly, and is co-chaired by a really outspoken advocate of geoengineering. So a person who has said that it's no longer a matter of yes or no, but it's a matter of whether we do this in an informed or an uninformed way. So that was speaking about solar radiation modification. And there are a few people who are frankly so clearly outspoken in their advocacy of deploying these technologies. So that's what the US wanted to link any work that went on under this resolution to UNEA with a program led by this person. And in a way, the negotiations really helped to expose the US and others' positions on solar radiation modification. So many of these countries were trying to change the resolution and even effectively opposing it, but because they want to be left alone to do their own sort of research and technology development. But then on the other hand, what we saw was real strong leadership from the African group in these negotiations. So headed by Djibouti, Africa came to the table with language highlighting calls for non-use of solar radiation modification, which of course is the position of the African ministers of the environment from last year's conference. And they also put forward this, like a really constructive, no harm proposal to establish a repository that could improve access to information for governments, stakeholders, and rights holders. So the idea was this would be a repository that could be set up under under the UNEP, and could compile information and acknowledge, existing information and knowledge about where the science is at, what we already know about the risks of these technologies to the environment, to human health, to human rights, society, geopolitical and security risks, information about the moratorium under the CBD, and how other aspects of international law come into play in terms of geoengineering. And this is absolutely key, because one of the things that we often hear from geoengineering advocates and SRM advocates in particular is that we need more research to better understand the risks and benefits of SRM and other forms of geoengineering, when in actual fact there has been a whole lot of research that has already been done, which clearly points to the potential for catastrophic impacts of deployment, really serious risks, and the fact that it would be impossible to test these technologies for their intended impact, which is cooling the climate, without full-scale deployment. So this knowledge exists. It's much more of a question of who has access to the information and knowledge. And the Africa proposal could have gone quite some way to answering that. And we saw many countries come in support of the Africa position. So many from Latin America and the Pacific, and ultimately even the EU came in and indicated that that was the only direction that they were willing to work in these negotiations. So that was really hugely positive. The negotiations dragged on into the second week, and that proposal from Djibouti, despite looking like a clear landing zone, didn't find its way into the final paper drafted by the co-chairs. And at the final informal of this negotiation anyway, in the middle of the second week, there was clearly no consensus in the room to continue on the basis of the new draft. So late that night, Switzerland withdrew the resolution altogether, and withdrawing resolutions doesn't happen very often. So that was really a huge win for African leadership. After really constructive engagement with the resolution, really sort of positive moves to get to a no harm, a landing ground that would have been useful, that wouldn't have legitimized technologies, but would have given a basis to move forward. And it means that we leave UNEA with a really firm foundation to build on, to advance the cause of non-use of solar radiation modification, which has been mentioned already, and I think the next speaker is also going to touch on. But this is an initiative that launched a few years ago and has the support of 500 scientists, 2,000 civil society organizations worldwide, as well as this political backing from the African ministers' decision last year. And we also saw, with some caveats, Erica has mentioned some of the issues with the youth organizing at UNEA, but we also saw widespread support in other civil society constituencies for the idea of non-use in the UNEA negotiations. And then just a few weeks after we had that win at UNEA, we also were able to celebrate in the Hands Off Mother Earth Alliance the cancellation of Harvard University's stratospheric controlled perturbation experiment, which is otherwise and slightly easier known as SCOPEX, following many years of pressure and indigenous-led resistance. And so this ScopeX project wanted to test the most talked about and best known kind of solar radiation modification. Again, Enfamiso talked about this earlier. So stratospheric aerosol injection, which aims to partially block sunlight by releasing pollutants, so compounds like sulfur dioxide, high in the atmosphere. And this would have been an open air experiment involving using a high altitude balloon that would release materials into the stratosphere and then measure the impact on the atmosphere's chemistry and how sunlight passes through it. And when ScopeX was announced in 2015, it was the first proposed outdoor experiment to test stratospheric aerosol injection deployment technology, and in potentially leading to technology deployment, it would have crossed a line that many in our movements and beyond find really quite unacceptable. So the project faced strong resistance from indigenous people at the two sites that Harvard had identified for the balloon launch, so the O'odham lands in southern Arizona and the Sami territory in Sweden, because these indigenous peoples did not consent to their lands being used for this purpose. And ScopeX never managed to launch its balloon test flight, and it has been on pause for over a year. And finally, it was cancelled last month, only a few weeks after we left Nairobi. And so it's a really important win. So obviously there are other experiments that have been announced since ScopeX, but because of its sort of status as the first and sitting at Harvard, it's a symbolically as well as practically really quite important win, and we really need to celebrate this along with the success at UNEA. We do and must celebrate, but we also know that there's a real proliferation of proposals, projects and experiments around the world. So including the marine cloud brightening trial that was launched with no advance warning in San Francisco Bay a couple of weeks earlier. So we can't afford to be complacent, and we need to keep building our movement, sharpening our narratives and our arguments, upholding the moratorium on all geoengineering at the CBD, and advancing the cause of non-use and resisting those who would attempt to geoengineer the only planet that we can call home. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Marie, pour cette brillante présentation qui trace déjà le succès du travail abattu par la société civile africaine. Continuons à cette position et dont nous demandons à tout le monde qui participe de pouvoir se joindre à cette initiative et célébrer ensemble la victoire pour l'Afrique. Nous passons à la dernière présentation. Ne pas géoingénieriser l'Afrique. Et c'est ça la lutte qui continue. Ça sera une présentation de M. Aubrey que nous avons présenté. C'est un activiste basé au Nigeria. Aubrey, vous avez la parole. Merci beaucoup. Aubrey.
Hi, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Yeah, so this is my face. Just want to show my face. I want you to see the person behind the platform, but I will put off my camera right now and then go straight to my presentation. So what I will clearly do is to give a bit of summary of what has been presented, to sum up, and then give some way forward on the next steps that we can collectively, on how we can collectively work together as a collective. So the Don't Geoengineer Africa campaign, of course, started actively in 2023, with but less than 10 African civil society organizations who are the core members of the Home Africa Working Group, Engage Geoengineering. We are committed to see the end of the push of geoengineering on the African continent. As has been outlined by the previous speakers, we have some good reasons why we are opposing this dangerous distraction called geoengineering. geoengineering, as my colleagues have mentioned, have unpredictable consequences on regional weather patterns, biodiversity and ecosystems, and human rights. It doesn't have a human face. Even the community of scientists is unsure on the safety and efficacy of geoengineering technologies, particularly in the African context. We are worried because geoengineering over the years have raised ethical questions around the issues of free, prior and informed consent, equity and justice, particularly in regions with limited resources and political power. We are worried about these technologies because the geoengineering project will definitely perpetuate the colonialist dynamics with external powers imposing technologies on African countries without proper consultation or consideration with local needs. We are worried because geoengineering will divert attention and resources away from essential climate change, mitigation and adaptation efforts. We are worried because geoengineering projects are driven by external interests for the purpose of making profit while marginalizing African voices for the place of decision-making authority. We are worried because geoengineering will have significant effect on the cultural and the social life of the people, particularly those who depend on natural resources and also their traditional practices. We are dissatisfied with geoengineering projects in Africa and globally because Africa has been seen as kind of a laboratory where dangerous technologies are tested. And these are proven technologies that we know will definitely have negative impact on human rights and the environment. In line with these concerns, we as a working group decided to demand the Don't Geoengineer Africa, which we are inviting you today to join us to make the demand that Don't Geoengineer Africa. This is both a demand and a command because we have the right to oppose that which we know we have negative consequences on our people and also their environment. Don't Geoengineer Africa has been our slogan in several places we've had the opportunity to be. The Home Africa Working Group, last year we organized 4 in-person meetings at the regional, both local, national, and regional level for more than 60 CSOs selected from about 15 African countries with the intent to strengthen capacity and build movement of CSO actors engaged in geoengineering. We actively participated in the UNCCC Bonn meeting that happened last year from June 5th to 15th, following the mandate for COP27 in Egypt, the previous year, 2022. We were also very visible at the Africa Climate Week held from September 4 to 8, 2023, with the aim to build momentum ahead of COP28 in Dubai. And in Dubai, the COP28, the Home Alliance Africa Working Group also made impactful contribution to that space. And of course, the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly that happened from February 26 to March 1st this year provided another opportunity for the Home Africa Working Group to pressure world leaders. As I have been shared by some of our colleagues, we produced a policy brief focusing on Don't Geoengineer Africa, why geoengineering should not be accepted in the African continent. I think that document will make a good read. So it's something that we need to grab and have a look at. We did a lot of media influence to ensure that the perspective of Africans are clearly reported, with the voices of the people echoing so loud against these dangerous technologies. Even though we have recorded some major victories against the financiers and the proponents of geoengineering projects across the globe, as already been reported by Mary Church, we are still cautious of the fact that the proponents of these dangerous technologies will not stop mounting pressure on our African government. It is the same way we are not going to stop resisting these dangerous technologies. In this note, the fight against geoengineering must go on, and we invite all our African CSOs to join us in this struggle. It is very important. We are going to share a link with you for those of you that want to be part of the Home Africa Working Group, for you to register. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to drop that link for us to register, for us to come together as a collective. Now, what can we do together when you have registered to be part of the Home Africa Working Group? You will join us to organize workshops, conferences, and public events to educate people about the risk and uncertainties of geoengineering. We are inviting you to join us to unite other CSOs, community groups, and activists to form a strong regional alliance against geoengineering. And we are inviting you to join us to launch targeted campaigns to influence policymakers, government, and international organizations to reject geoengineering. We are inviting you today to join us to conduct independent research and monitoring to expose the dangers of geoengineering and hold those promoting it accountable. We are inviting you today to join us to engage with local communities, indigenous people, and marginalized groups to amplify their voices and concerns. We are inviting you to help us, to assist us in analyzing and critiquing geoengineering policies, while we propose alternatives that prioritize people's rights and environmental protection. We are inviting you to join us to utilize media channels, social media, and alternative platforms to disseminate information that will counter the geoengineering propaganda and amplify the voices of indigenous people against geoengineering. By working together, we believe that we can build a stronger regional movement against geoengineering, protecting the environment, and upholding the rights and interests of marginalized communities. Please, we call on you again to join the Africa Working Group by filling the form that is going to be posted on the chat box. You can also share that with your colleagues that you feel that will be relevant to the campaign against geoengineering in Africa. Thank you very much for taking our time to participate in this 8-day series that is focused on geoengineering. Thank you, comrades.
Merci beaucoup, Aubrey Joey. Nous passons à l'étape des questions-réponses. Jusque-là, nous venons d'enregistrer une seule question qui est adressée à Erika. Erika, il y a la question qu'on vous a posée, qu'est-ce qu'il faut aux jeunes afin d'attirer leur engagement dans la lutte contre la géoingénierie? Erika, vous avez la parole pour orienter cette question. La deuxième question,
Thank you.
c'est la deuxième question. Merci pour votre présentation, cher Aubrey Joy. C'est votre question. Pourquoi la société civile africaine n'a pas une même vision sur les méfaits de la géoingénierie en Afrique? Pourquoi la société civile africaine n'a pas une même vision sur les méfaits de la géoingénierie en Afrique? Erika, nous commençons par vous, Erika. Comment faire pour attirer la jeunesse pour lutter contre la géoingénierie en Afrique? Erika.
Thank you so much for the question. My answer to the question on how to involve young people in Africa in the fight against geoengineering, one is through popular education, building young people's understanding on the negative impacts of geoengineering, understanding how it's a colonial and imperial crisis, and how to debunk some of the arguments that proponents of geoengineering are pushing to manufacture consent for this dangerous technology. That is one. And then on concrete avenues of how young people can join the fight against geoengineering, one of the ways is, of course, for young people to endorse the Solar Geoengineering Non-Use Agreement, and also to join young movements like ANGRI, which is the Alliance of Non-Governmental Radical Youth, which is the first ever youth-led initiative to push back against the weaponization of the youth label to legitimize false solutions like geoengineering, CCS, debt for nature swaps, and all of those other solutions that are disastrous for communities in Africa. Thank you.
Merci Eric pour la réponse. Aubrey.
Aubrey. Yes, thank you very much, Joshua. Yes. I think this is a very highly political question. But I will say this. That the civil society community, some are on the right, some are on the left. Okay, and some of us are aligned from the left because our views are quite different. We are very meticulous in terms of analyzing what is put on the table. Okay, we don't jump at every proposal that is put on the table because we see deeper. We see deeper, and some civil society groups, they embrace everything. They don't question anything. Okay, so from where we are coming from, our own alignment, we are known for questioning the motives of corporate entities. We are known for questioning the motives of policymakers. Because most of the proposals put on the table, they are to serve personal interests and not to serve the interests of the people, and not to serve the interests of the environment. So any technology or any form of proposal that do not have a human face or that do not align with the right to the protected environment, then automatically it is a questionable proposal already put on the table. And one of the reasons why those diverse views are actually put on the table is because many civil society groups have their own different priorities, okay, for which they were formed. And where the division is also coming is from the funding community. Okay, so the funding community actually is where the division of civil society groups across the world comes in. That is why some of us, we are careful the kind of funders we approach. Because the moment you approach one particular funder, if you're not careful, your own political character is already tempered with. So what we need to be doing consciously, we need to continue to raise that awareness. We need to continue to speak to who we have time to speak to. I will just give you an example. On this working group, we had an issue sometime last year. We secure funding to do this to carry out this campaign from a particular funder, and that funder was actually telling us to tilt our own campaign ideology towards what they believe in and not what we believe in. That forced us to canceling that contract. And of course, it's a big money for us to actually job at to do the work. That is one of the reasons why you see African civil society organizations are having the diverse views. Anywhere benefits, as far as there is money there, they are going there to launch such campaign. And not that they are doing that for the interest. Actually, they are not doing it for to satisfy their conscience, but they are actually doing it for to amass resources to do the work. And of course, we know some of those CSOs in Africa doing that. Okay, so that is why you see that we have some of those diverse views. And the other issue is capacity issue and expertise. That is why we need to continue to conscientize our people for them to have the clear understanding of issues. Thank you.
Merci Aubrey, merci à tout le monde, merci à tous les participants. Il y aura nécessairement pour tous ceux-là qui se sont enregistrés, on va vous présenter, donc l'équipe va vous partager les présentations. Nous comprenons que le temps est presque à la fin. Pour ne pas abuser du temps des uns des autres, j'invite Dr Mfoniso Antia, CL, de clôturer la réunion d'aujourd'hui. Sinon, c'était un plaisir de célébrer ensemble la Journée internationale de la Terre en ayant un regard fixé sur les menaces que nous avons en tant qu'Africains face aux technologies dangereuses qui détournent l'attention du monde pour bien lutter contre les changements climatiques, pour appuyer l'adaptation et l'atténuation au niveau communautaire et donner des fonds qui doivent aider les communautés et les peuples autochtones à bien faire face au changement climatique. Docteur Mfoniso, vous avez la parole pour clôturer la réunion. Merci beaucoup.
Hi, everyone. I want to say on behalf of the African Working Group on Geoengineering, thank you very much for finding the time to join us in this short webinar. The idea was to expose us to the things that we started to do on the working group, and hoping that with this you are able to join us in this fight against geoengineering in Africa. We have seen, I think by this time we've answered all the questions on the comments, and then we also acknowledge the comments that you have posted also. Thank you very much. Please, my colleague Ubrejo has dropped a link for those who are interested in joining the working group. Please do sign up and join us. And you can reach us, can reach any of us, Joshua, myself, Ubre, Mary George, Eric, Nikki, Kwame, and the rest. If you really have a pressing question that you need answered after this, you can just reach us with your question. Thank you very much again for joining us, and thank you to all the presenters. Thank you, Joshua, for a great facilitation. Maimoni, thank you. Mary Church, thank you. And Nikki, thank you for being at the back end of the Zoom link. And then thank you to the General Home Coordinator, Corina. And thank you for everyone who made this happen. Kwame, thank you. And Eric, thank you very much, and see you. And as we continue the fight until victory. So see you. There's an email address that you can reach Nikki on, nikki@handsofmotherEarth.org, please. You can use that to reach us. If any question comes where we'll be able to say. So thank you once again. Namaste.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merci. Ciao, ciao. Bye bye. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Merci. Merci. Bonne fête. Merci.